If you look at a modern map of southeastern Turkey, you'll quickly notice several peculiar-looking lakes. They are placed along the two major rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. You wouldn't be able to find them on an ancient map of the region, because they have only appeared in the recent decades. These are water reservoirs created by the construction of giant dams along the course of the rivers. The dams are parts of the massive Turkish infrastructure initiative called the Southeastern Anatolia Project. There are 22 dams in the plan, 16 of which have already been constructed. The dams and their hydroelectric power plants bring irrigation and cheap electricity to the region. The project has been a great boon for the local industries. In the 30 years since the construction of the Ataturk Dam, the output of the local cotton industry has quadrupled. Fishing is now a booming enterprise in a region where fisheries used to be non-existent. But economic growth comes at a cost. This massive infrastructure effort has caused displacement of tens of thousands of people and the destruction of local communities. The locations where people have chosen to build settlements in the past naturally make for ideal spots to place the dams. This also explains another kind of collateral damage done by the project. Upper Mesopotamia is an extremely important archaeological region. It has been inhabited since the dawn of agriculture. There are remnants of settlements which are more than 10,000 years old. But whenever a decision is made where to place the new dam, the interests of archaeologists are very low on the list of priorities. The ancient metropolis of Samosata was submerged in 1989 by the construction of the Ataturk Dam. The town of Hasankeyf and its archaeological sites were flooded in 2020, despite their significance for Roman, Arab, Turkish and Kurdish history. When the Birechik Dam was constructed in the year 2000, and the water levels upstream started to rise, it looked like the old Roman city of Zeugma would be another casualty of the push for economic development. If a renowned city like Samosata couldn't have been saved, what chance would Zeugma stand? But thanks to the last-moment desperate efforts and the miraculous intervention of a rich benefactor, the most valuable of the city's artifacts have been saved. This video is the story of Zeugma, its rise, decline, rediscovery, and preservation of its legacy. The story of Zeugma begins shortly after the campaigns of Alexander the Great. In the wake of his death, the reign over the shards of his empire was fought over by his successor generals, the Diadochi. In one of these wars, General Seleucus wrestled the control of Mesopotamia from his rival Antigonus. In the early 3rd century BC, he established twin cities on the opposite banks of the Euphrates. The two cities were connected by a pontoon bridge, which provided an important strategic link between his territories in Mesopotamia and Syria. Combining strategic planning with a romantic gesture, Seleucus named the city on the right bank Seleucia after himself, and the one on the left bank Apameia after his wife. The Greek word for a pontoon bridge is Zeugma, and this became a colloquial name for the twin cities. The end of the Diadochi Wars marks the first golden age of Zeugma. Relatively peaceful late 3rd and early 2nd centuries BC saw the flourishing of commerce and Hellenistic art. However, the arrival of Parthians disrupted this development. The ambush at Ecbatana in 129 BC ended Seleucid rule in the east, and Zeugma once again became a frontier city. Over the course of the next few decades, the control over it switched between the Seleucids, Parthians, Armenians, and their client kings. Then Pompey the Great marched the first Roman army east of the Euphrates in mid-60s BC, marking the beginning of the Republic's interest in the region. For most of the 1st century BC, Zeugma remained under control of Commagene, the Mesopotamian kingdom allied to Rome on paper, but more so to Pompey personally. In 55 BC, Zeugma saw the army of Crassus march across its bridge, and later its pitiful remnants marching back after suffering a humiliating defeat at Carrhae. Then Parthians struck into the Levant, but were driven back by the legions of Mark Antony. These same legions would in 4 years cross Euphrates themselves, in another ill-fated Roman attempt to invade Parthia. Only with the victory of Augustus would direct Roman control over Zeugma be established, and the Euphrates would become the stable frontier between Rome and Parthia. Zeugma's second golden age begins at this point. Its new economic boom was fueled by military spending and border tolls. There is an amusing anecdote about the customs office at Zeugma from the life of Apollonius of Tyana. When the philosopher was crossing the Euphrates to Mesopotamia, the toll collector asked him if he had anything to declare. Apollonius, in response, started listing nouns, which sounded like Greek feminine names: prudence, justice, virtue, temperance, perseverance. "That's a lot of slaves," replied the toll collector. "Can you just write me a list of them?" "I can't," answered Apollonius. "These aren't slaves, these are my mistresses." Apart from taxing the trade and quirky philosophers, the city also profited from being the permanent base of a legion, Legio IV Scythica. It was established by Mark Antony in 42 BC and participated in his failed attempt to invade Parthia. After his death, the legion was transferred to the Balkans, where it acquired the honorary title Scythian by fighting the nomadic tribes along the Danube. When the hostilities with Parthia resumed during the reign of Nero, the legion was transferred to the Euphrates. There, under the command of Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo, they finally got a chance to get back at the Parthians, before being permanently stationed at Zeugma. This arrangement was a great boon for the local economy. Having more than 5,000 soldiers, who are paid 4 times a year in silver, had an enormous impact on the city's markets. Zeugma's wealth and population exploded. It's estimated to have had more than 80,000 inhabitants in the 2nd century AD, which would place it somewhere in the top 20 most populous cities of the whole empire. When the 4th Scythian Legion was covering itself in glory in Trajan's Parthian campaign, opulent villas were being constructed in Zeugma, financed by the profits of its markets. The economic boom attracted the artists from all across the Hellenistic East, who would decorate those villas with beautiful mosaics. But all good things come to an end, and the end of Zeugma's flourishing came with the crisis of the 3rd century. In place of the ailing Parthian kingdom, the mighty Sasanian Empire rose in the east. In 253, Shapur I took advantage of turmoil in Rome and invaded Mesopotamia. His army besieged Zeugma, captured it, and put it to the torch. The city would never recover its former glory. Zeugma lost its status as a trade center, but retained strategic importance for another 400 years. Its name pops up here and there in the chronicles of the wars between the Romans and the Persians. Finally, in the 7th century, the Arab conquest swept over the region and changed the strategic disposition. Zeugma was no longer relevant and was abandoned sometime in the Middle Ages. By the time the Turks had settled in the village of Belkis nearby, nothing but ruins remained of the Hellenistic city. The site of Zeugma has been continuously stripped of its treasures since the 19th century. The looters who took the mosaics from the site weren't even aware of the city's name, but they knew that they could get a solid price for its goods in the museums of Paris, London and St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, the academic archaeologists couldn't decide on the exact location of the city's ruins. In 1917, Franz Camon argued strongly for the site near the village of Belkis, based on the information from Pliny the Elder. But the official excavations began only in 1976. Then, a ceramic tile stamped Legio IV Scythica was dug out, confirming the location. In 1993, archaeologist David Kennedy raised money for further excavations and unearthed a big Roman house with a cistern and 4 rooms. After his funding dried up, the archaeologists of Gaziantep Museum continued the excavation, uncovering more valuable artifacts. But the construction of Birechek Dam, less than a mile downstream from Zeugma, was already underway. When constructed, the dam would create an artificial lake, which would submerge the most historically significant part of the site. In 1994, the researchers of Gaziantep University issued an international plea for help in emergency excavation of the site. It attracted some funds, most notably from the French government and from the local municipality, but the scope of excavation remained limited throughout the rest of the 90s. In the spring 2000, the money for the excavation were running low, while the waters of the artificial lake were rising. The findings so far were interesting, but nothing extraordinary. However, the excavation of a magnificent Roman villa from the 2nd century AD changed the situation entirely. The villa contained the most impressive collection of mosaics seen so far, and was itself quite unique. No Roman houses like this one have been discovered in this part of the former empire. This finding elevated Zeugma's significance for the lovers of antiquity throughout the world, and brought much-needed attention to the site. The Packard Humanities Institute donated $5 million to the emergency excavation. This allowed the operation to expand by orders of magnitude. Hundreds of local laborers and archaeologists began working around the clock to save as many artifacts as they could from the rising waters of the Euphrates. The media has also done its part in spreading the word about the effort. The image of a woman with beautiful eyes, dubbed the Gypsy Girl, became one of the most recognized mosaics of antiquity. But the mosaics were not the only historically interesting things found at Zeugma. There were bronze statues and figurines, soldiers' equipment, and thousands of Roman coins. The city has proven to be one of the most impressive sites of its era. Only a few others, such as Pompey, could rival it in size and the level of preservation of its treasures. So why have Zeugma's artifacts survived in such a good condition? The answer lies in the key episode of the city's history. The fires of the Sasanian sack in 253 AD created so much charcoal that the metal artifacts buried in the soil were shielded from the acids and the corrosion that they bring. In an ironic twist of fate, Zeugma's violent destruction enabled the preservation of its legacy. But for the city that's only been rediscovered thanks to the threat of flooding, the irony of fate seems to become a tradition. As the waters of the Euphrates were closing in, the archaeologists were reaching the conclusion of their mission. The amount of magnificent works of Hellenistic art that's been recovered was amazing. They required a whole new museum to store. This museum was opened in 2011 in the nearby city of Gaziantep. Today the lower third of Zeugma lies underwater, but the rest of the site is still accessible. In 2008, archaeologists excavated a temple and sanctuary where 3 colossal statues of Greek gods were found, and there is still more to uncover. Since 2012, Zeugma has been on the tentative list for UNESCO World Heritage Sites. On February 6, 2023, little more than a week before I'm posting this video, an earthquake of an enormous magnitude struck the city of Gaziantep and the surrounding region. The catastrophe has brought an untold destruction and already claimed tens of thousands of lives. Hundreds of thousands more have suffered because of it in both Turkey and Syria. The relief efforts are especially tough for Syria because of the ongoing civil war and the sanctions. If you're watching this video in the early 2023, consider donating to a trusted charitable organization that helps the victims of this earthquake. The proceedings of this video will be donated to Malteser International Emergency Relief Group. I'm not using YouTube Giving, so don't donate to me, because I think YouTube takes the cut. Just go directly to the page of a reliable charity. Also, please don't get too irritated by the unusually high amount of ads on this video. That is all from me. Feel free to ask any remaining questions in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one.